What we have with us today is TVS's first adventure bike, and it's a long time coming because this is a company that has competed at the Dakar Rally with French company Sherco for 10 years now. But we finally got one. It's nothing like a Dakar Rally bike, nothing like a hardcore off-roader, as you can probably tell by looking at it, but we'll get to that later. I think for now we should start with why has TVS made an all-new 300 when they already have a 310? Now, the reason behind that is because the 310 project was co-developed with BMW. It started off on the BMW bikes and then it came to the RR310, the RTR 310. But that bike has also been out for nearly 10 years now, and BMW is ready to move on to a 450. So with the fact that it's so old, TVS decided that they needed to develop their own 300 engine because this is a segment that TVS believes has a lot of value for them. And that's why the new Apache RTX 300 has debuted. Now, let's move on to what this motorcycle is. It is effectively a road adventure tourer. I wouldn't call it just a road bike. It does have quite a lot of capability in it. Lots of muck on our bike. We've had lots of fun today. I'm full of dust and it's been a good time. The bike can do quite a bit, but do not confuse it for a hardcore off-roader because that's not what it is. Let's start with the way it looks because this is the first time we're getting a really nice look at this motorcycle. There have been some leaked images, but in person, it really has a good sense of presence. And that's primarily down to this bodywork out here. Now, up front, you've got these large twin LED headlamps. Let me show you what they look like when they're turned on. Unfortunately, we started our ride just after the sun started coming out today, so I can't give you a full review of how good this headlamp is, but the initial impression is that it's a nice clean spread with no, hollow patches of light, and it seems to do a really good job. It also adds to the design element because there are these little LED details in there that stand out when you see the bike in the mirror, and they give the bike a sense of identity. I should also confirm that this beak out here is an optional accessory, as are these hand guards, crash guards, and solid metal bash plate. Now, moving on to the side, if you come a little towards the side, you'll see that the bodywork flows really nicely into the fuel tank. It's all sort of one continuous motion. There's no big gaps, and it doesn't look like a slim and long motorcycle like some of its rivals do. Further back, you've got some really neat ducting in here to get hot air away from the rider. Further back, this is the one design element in here that's adding some detail. It's a little bit of bodywork, and it does sort of add some drama to the rear, as does the exhaust. Now, the RTR 310, for some reason, people really don't seem to like the look of that exhaust online. I don't think they're going to have a problem with this because it's a really stylish looking exhaust. It has a nice upswept look that goes with an adventure bike. From the rear, you will see that there are twin outlet ports out there for the exhaust. This is not really a highly functional thing. It's more for the looks, but TVS says that they were also able to engineer a little bit of nicer sound coming out there. Finally, at the rear, let me show you what the tail light looks like. Now, at a first glance, this is really quite a lot like the Tiger 900. But when you look closely, you'll see that the shape of the fender, the shape of the taillight itself is a little different. But honestly, this motorcycle is a very handsome bike. And the more you look at it, the more you'll get hints of, I see Aprilia Touareg, some people see Versys in there. There's a lot of nice looking design elements in here. Not completely out of the box, but it comes together in a very cohesive way to make this a good looking bike. Now, with the design talked about, let me show you what the riding position is like. This is an 835mm seat height. It is a little bit on the higher end for this segment. It's actually a little taller on paper than the KTM 250 Adventure as well. But there are a lot of good things going on here. First, let me show you that perspective. I am a little over 6 foot tall, and I find this to be a very comfortable motorcycle, probably one of the most spacious and accommodating Indian bikes out there. The seat itself has a lot of room, and the interface between my knee and my thigh is really good over here. Again, there's a lot of room and it fits in really well. So from that perspective, this is a very comfortable bike for bigger riders. The riding position is also quite good. The handlebar is wide but not very tall, and when you're sitting, this is perfectly good. Standing up, I'm not so happy with the riding position for a few reasons. The bend forward is not really a big issue for me. The bigger issue is that the foot pegs seem quite widely spaced out, and I can't get a very good grip on the motorcycle. There's sort of an air gap out here, and there's nothing for my knees to hold on to. And I actually preferred sitting on this motorcycle off-road, which worked quite well, but I will discuss off-road in a bit. Now, to show you what this seat is like for a shorter person, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give you a good demo. So we've got Rishaad here from the backup crew who's shooting us. Rishaad, please come in. Rishaad is 5'5", and he's going to show you what that's like. Now, bear in mind, this is a 180 kilo motorcycle, and it's on an incline, so it's a little tough for him to get off the side stand. He is on his tiptoes on this off-road terrain. And I think if you're about 5'6", 5'7" onwards, you should be able to manage this bike quite easily. Thanks, Rishabh. Right, with that taken care of, let's talk about the really big deal with this motorcycle. That new 300cc engine is 299cc, and while you may think, yeah, TVS must have started from the 310 and changed the bore and stroke and made it smaller, it really is nothing related to that engine. The whole crankcase design, the orientation of the engine, the BMW engine was a reverse tilt engine. This is not. It is a completely different engine, and I'm told there are no takeover parts from here. Interestingly, despite the fact that bore and stroke are different, the power and torque figures are pretty much identical to the RTR 310. It's 36 horsepower and it's a little lower in terms of peak RPM than the RTR. It's 9,000 here versus 9,700 there. That is a good thing. Peak torque comes at 7,000 RPM, which is a little high. It's actually a little higher than that engine. And you would rightly expect that this engine then is still quite similar in nature. It does need to be revved. We are at a bit of altitude right now. We've got a lot of steep inclines. And there are times when you just have to downshift second or first gear to get good drive. I think it will be a more tractable feeling engine than the 310 when you ride it normally. It does feel like from 4,000 RPM onwards, there's a bit more available when you roll on the throttle, and that 9 to 10,000 RPM, which was a surprisingly zingy part on the old engine, doesn't seem to be so exciting in terms of how it pulls on this bike. So it does feel like it's a more linear engine in its delivery, but it's not a very different feeling engine to the RTR. In terms of sound, TVS always does a good job with that. So let's give you a sound check. Someone's doing that right there. Okay. Again, nothing out of the box, nothing groundbreaking, nothing new, but it's a nice, deep, clean sound, and it sort of goes well with the character of this bike. Now, the big and only issue really with the old 310 engine was refinement and vibrations. TVS worked really hard over 7 years, and every year they kept iterating and improving, and it did get better, but it never was good enough. This motorcycle, I can tell you, the handlebar is completely free of vibrations no matter what engine speed. They've got little rubber mounts out here. They've done a lot of work to isolate the rider from that aspect. At high RPMs, I do notice a mild tingle in the bodywork out here and in the foot pegs, nothing much in the seat. I am wearing really thickly padded winter riding gear today, but it is a huge improvement in refinement, and I do not see this as a negative. Single cylinder engines will have some sensation that you're going to feel. This is sensation, it's not a negative, and that is a big and much needed improvement from this engine. As for performance, unfortunately, I really can't tell you because we've had no straight stretches of roads today. I don't know what RPM 100 kilometers an hour comes in 6th gear, but what I can tell you is the first 3 to 4 gears are quite closely spaced together, and then 5th and 6th seem like taller gears. I tried 6th once, it was useless. Even 5th, very rarely ventured there. 4th is a very usable gear. You can go down to 25, 30 kilometers an hour and just ride out of it. So rideability in the lower gears should be good, whereas the higher gears seem to be geared towards highway touring. It's only something I can tell you later. Similarly, in terms of how heavy this clutch feels, it's not particularly light or heavy at the moment, but let's get it stuck in some traffic, see what the clutch is like, see what engine heat is like, and what this windscreen is like. Today it was great, it kept me shielded from the cold air, but we'll have to get back to Mumbai, properly test the bike and give you that feedback. All right, now let's move on to the chassis. Again, you would think that this is probably based on the BMW G310 GS. It's a very similar setup, 19-inch front wheel, 17-inch rear wheel. Alloy wheels, 180 mm of suspension travel at both ends, 200 mm of ground clearance, similar seat height. But in reality, it's completely different. You can just look at a picture of the G310 GS and this bike and you'll see that the very shape of the chassis is different, and TVS had to create a new chassis because of how that engine fits in there. It is a steel trellis frame, steel trellis subframe, and a die-cast aluminum swing arm. Now the chassis, TVS has always been really good at this, and it's no surprise that this bike handles very well. It is not a sporty motorcycle in how rapidly it turns or how it sort of engages you to ride aggressively. And I think a KTM 250 Adventure will be a more engaging handler. This is just a very adept motorcycle. It handles well. It'll get onto the side of the tire quite nicely. It fills you with confidence, but not particularly sporty. As for the tires, these are purpose-built tires by Eurogrip for this motorcycle. At first this morning, they didn't feel very good. I wasn't getting a good sense of them, but it was also 10 degrees. And as we got some temperature in them, they started to feel better. Once we hit the off-road stretch, again the initial impression wasn't great, but this bike is the top BTO version that has a tire pressure monitoring system, and the display was telling me we were at 32, 33, 34 psi, which is too high for off-road. A little bit lower pressures and it started to behave much nicer. What I really liked off-road though is the suspension. Now it is not as much as a KTM 250 Adventure, but it behaves really well on this motorcycle. Bad roads, you just sit and ride through them. You do not need to stand up. It soaks it in really well. Perhaps not as well as a Himalayan, but it's really very good, and it's probably better than the KTM 250 Adventure in how it can just eat a bad road with composure at both ends in terms of the damping. Unlike the BMW G310 GS, those of you who remember had a very soggy rear shock. The moment you sit on it, the bike just would collapse and half its travel would be gone. Not so much here. And interestingly, TVS tells us that this suspension is not Kayaba like it was in the 310s. This is actually WP suspension made by Endurance in India. Now, back to the off-road. It's all about how well the chassis deals with the terrain. I tried standing up initially, but I just didn't feel comfortable. I couldn't get a good sense of connection with the bike, and I don't like the standing ergos for aggressive off-road riding. But I realized that you can just sit on it and ride through, and the bike soaks it all in really well. Rocky sections, slushy sections, it was good fun. I did not expect a bike that looks like this, that clearly has touring in its orientations, to be this much fun. You will surely get more confidence and feedback from a Himalayan or a KTM 390 Adventure, the one with the spoke wheels, if you really want to go attacking trails. But this bike will get you through that terrain, and not just get you through it, it'll keep a smile on your face, and I think that is a big deal. Right, so overall today the RTX 310 has come across as a very good all-rounder motorcycle. It's not particularly wowing me in terms of aggression or sportiness. It doesn't have that edge that you might find on some KTMs, but it does come across as a very good all-rounder, and TVS has been very thoughtful with the features they've given it. It's not too much like you will get on the RTR 310, and there's not a whole bunch of options that you have to spec. You do get cruise control, which long-distance tourers will appreciate. You get a 5-inch TFT display, which is very nice. You also get a screen mirroring system that can put Google Maps from your phone onto the display, which is also very nice. Royal Enfield does something similar. Unfortunately, like Royal Enfield, you can't turn the display off on the phone. It has to be on. That's not something the manufacturer has control over. It's something that Google says, so the screen needs to be kept on. You can just dim the brightness down. If you don't want to do that, you can just use regular navigation prompts. There's a whole bunch of Bluetooth features like TVS normally gives you, document storage, all sorts of things very cleverly put into that display. From the rider's perspective, you have 4 different riding modes. Within those modes, they change things like the power delivery. There's 2 different engine modes, how the ABS is tuned and how the traction control is tuned. I just found myself turning off the traction control, turning off the rear ABS in rally mode, and that was ideal. And I liked the fact that the bike remembers your choice and keeps it that way even when you turn the switch back on. It's not overly equipped like the RTR 310, and there's not a whole bunch of features that you have to keep paying extra money for. At the base version itself, you get that nice LED headlamp, the TFT display, cruise control as standard, adjustable levers, and that itself is a good setup if you're someone who just wants to spend the least amount of money possible. But if you spend a little bit more, it's about 15,000 rupees more, you get the top variant, and that brings in the screen mirroring feature that I talked about, as well as a bi-directional quick shifter. Today I felt that this quick shifter and the gearbox in general doesn't feel quite as crisp as on the RTR 310. Maybe we need to spend a little more time with it. These bikes are quite new. If you go for the top BTO version, you will get damping adjustment for the front fork, compression and rebound, as well as rebound adjustability for the rear shock. You also get a brass coated chain. Not something you may particularly want. Unfortunately, we haven't ridden the bike with the stock suspension. When you go back to the RTR 310 though, the stock suspension works really well. There was no need for the adjustable suspension. It's a nice thing to have, but it's not like you need to have it. So that in a nutshell is what this motorcycle is about. But let's talk about the downsides, and I really am struggling to find them. There's only one thing that stood out to me as an area that needs improvement, and that is the fueling on the engine. Now, I rode 2 different motorcycles today and they both behaved slightly differently. Some people said they didn't like the fueling, some people said they had no issue. What I found is that on a closed throttle with some engine braking, it's a little inconsistent. It sometimes doesn't slow down the way you expect it to. Sometimes when you roll on the gas, you get a bit of a hesitation. There is room for improvement in the fueling. It was a similar story with the RTR 310 engine a few years ago. TVS did improve it over time, and I think they do have some work on their hands with this as well. There's also the fact that this seat height will be a challenge for shorter riders, and that this 12.5 litre fuel tank is a little smaller than you would expect on a bike like this. That being said, with an engine of this size, you should still be able to easily get about 200 to 250 kilometers on a tank full. But honestly, apart from that, this bike comes across as really well made, high quality. The panels all fit together really well. It's all plastic all over, but it feels good. There's no cheapness all over. This huge luggage rack feels nice. There's only one slightly inconsistent panel gap over here that I've noticed on all the motorcycles, but everything else is high quality and feels like much more than what you are paying for this motorcycle. And that is the big appeal with this bike. It's what you're paying. It's disruptive pricing. It's 1.99 lakh ex-showroom for the base bike, which itself is quite nicely equipped. 2.14 lakh if you want the screen mirroring and the bi-directional quick shifter, which I would recommend you go for because a quick shifter always elevates the riding experience. And then 2.29 if you go for the BTO. These are introductory prices. Who knows how well they will last, but they put the bike in a very aggressive part of the market. It's over a lakh of rupees less than the Himalayan or the 390 Adventure, even the 390 Adventure X. It's 40,000 rupees less than the KTM 250 Adventure. It's on par with the V-Strom 250, which is a much lower level motorcycle than this. It's even on par with some 350cc motorcycles from Royal Enfield and again significantly cheaper than the Scram 440. This is phenomenal value. It is going to shake things up in the adventure bike segment and it's a good thing. So overall what I see here is a bike that I think many Indians actually want. We want a bike that is comfortable over all terrain, a comfortable bike to cover long distances on, a well-made motorcycle, a good-looking bike, and a bike at a good price. TVS really has hit a lot of those nails right on the head. They're also trying to elevate the post-purchase buying experience. There's a bunch of accessories. I talked about some of them in the beginning. They've tied up with Italian brand Givi for top boxes, side cases. They've tied up with Alpine Stars for a range of gear. They're going to conduct their own adventure riding academies. There is a lot to look forward to. And I think this bike really has the potential to shake up the adventure space. It's just what we needed in India at the moment. Very exciting motorcycle indeed. And I am looking forward to riding it down in the real world, in traffic, in heat, and just see what it's all about.